give us the faith to go for two. Amen. Since then you have been raised with Christ. Set your hearts on the things above, where Christ is seated on the right side of God. Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things. Do you have some friends who are cynical? I grew up with a close friend, and he always imitated his parents by making sarcastic and caustic observations about the shortcomings of others. I remember him teasing me he didn't like my shoes. They weren't good penny loafers. I found I could spend short amounts of time with him, but his presence and his outlook oftentimes left me drained. And while his sarcastic humor frequently had me giggling, I wanted to limit the time I spent with him and his family. I wondered why. Now let me get personal. Are you cynical? Let's define what it means. Merriam-Webster defines cynical as believing that people are generally selfish and dishonest. By that definition, I'm cynical. But I want to expand the definition for my own purposes here today a little deeper. For me, a cynical person is one who not only believes that people are selfish and dishonest, but also one who is unwilling to allow hope and possibility to be present. You know what I'm talking about. The person that doesn't want it to come in, that resists hopefulness in any way. When Mary Magdalene went to the tomb on that first Easter morning, she faced a world which was cynical. The Romans were tired, and they were annoyed with what they perceived to be Middle Eastern spirituality and fanaticism. The Sanhedrin and all the Jewish leaders were nervous and uptight about losing control of the balance of power and their precious world of traditional piety and religious pretension. And the group of followers of the one they called Christ were claiming such an absolute belief from its adherents that they were quickly dismissed as fanatics. But their faith did seem to make an amazing difference to them. When Mary Magdalene ran to Simon Peter with an open mind and a searching heart. But Simon Peter was the one who had been controlled by the rules of the world that the world had set for him. So it was John that ran to the tomb to check out the story. And by the way, did you notice that? John is quick to point out who arrived first. I wonder if our seminarians, who would be the first to arrive at the tomb? Daniel says clearly it would be him. I suspect Peter was fighting at that moment through his mood of despondency and despair. Peter knew he'd let Jesus down, and now Jesus was dead. His heart was breaking, and he could believe no more. And yet there was a little bit of him that wanted to believe. But when he arrived at the empty tomb, the question of what had happened was not resolved. As John so poignantly puts it, they still did not grasp that Jesus had to rise from the dead. They were held captive to the cynicism of their age. And they returned to their homes with no belief that Jesus had been resurrected. What I want to say to you this morning is that the resurrection changes everything. it slams the door in the center aisle. And I want to give you two models of two. The first image is the story of a composer. In this crowd, I had to get a musical illustration. One night in 1741, a bent old man shuffled listlessly down a dark London street. His mind was a battleground between hope based on his past glories and despair for the future. 4 years before, a cerebral hemorrhage had paralyzed his right side, and then his patron, Queen Caroline, died. Nearing 60, he felt old and hopelessly tired. Paul knows who I'm talking about. And a few others do too. He wearily looked at some lyrics that a second-rate, pampered poet named Charles Jennings had given him. He was annoyed to even have to read them. And then suddenly, his eyes fell on a passage. He was despised and rejected of men. He looked for some to have pity on him, and there was no man, neither found any to comfort him. And as he continued to read, he suddenly realized the choice that was before him. He could throw the words away or believe that God, the same God, would work the miracle of the resurrection, which he had never trusted, could work a miracle for him. The next moments, he chose to see reality from a position of faith. 24 days he labored like a fiend with little rest or food. When he fell asleep in exhaustion, the score of the Messiah. And his desk. Now, the second image is for those who are a little less recondite in their knowledge. It's for the sports people. It's a baseball player. The story of Babe Ruth is poignantly told in the movie The Babe. Babe grew up in a Jesuit industrial school for orphans, as his parents wanted nothing to do with him, labeling him as incorrigible and without hope. And when his baseball career started to ascend, the Babe was tireless in his visits to homes and children's hospitals when he was not carousing or playing baseball. And one day at the end of the game, a father confronted him and begged him to visit his son. His son was dying in the hospital. The Babe went to see young Johnny Sylvester. The movie portrays a very sickly child looking up at the Babe with gaunt eyes, struggling for something to say. The Babe says, "Well, I'll hit a home run for you tomorrow, Johnny." With a solemn look, Johnny responds, "2 fingers. Not 1, 2. Babe is stunned. "You want me to hit 2 home runs?" Without smiling, Johnny nods yes. Babe gulps and then replies that he will hit the 2. But Johnny must get better, and the pact is made. The first at bat is a home run. The second and the third are meaningless outs. With a streak against him in the 9th inning, it looks like Babe will not fulfill his promise. But Babe Ruth hits the next pitch over the wall. Years later, it's Johnny Sylvester who comes to comfort Babe. When he had nothing left to believe, he did not ask for 1. He went for 2. On this Easter afternoon, I invite you to go for 2. By embracing 2 simple facts with your mind and then doing 4 simple things with your heart. First, I want you to be in the mind, or to be minded, to use the language of the scriptures, of the fact that the tomb really was empty. The tomb was empty. All the gospel accounts agree on that fact. And surprisingly, so do the critics of the resurrection. So that's a fact that no one denies. They try to explain how the tomb became empty, but in general their theories kind of stumble at that point. Many critics even avoid a reference to the empty tomb altogether. But in fact, the tomb, in one sense, wasn't really empty. The grave clothes of Jesus are described as lying limp in a prone position, as if the body dematerialized through them. So that's fact number one. The second fact I ask you to embrace with your mind is the reality that the disciples were dramatically changed. Something had obviously happened to the disciples. Something which transformed them from a defeated band of cowards to a bold band of believers who were willing to take on the Roman and Jewish world, even unto death. Peter, of course, is the paramount example. So that's with your mind. Now I want to ask you to do something with your heart. The Apostle Paul instructed us to set your hearts on the things that are above, where Christ is seated on the right side of God. The resurrection leads our heart to a world that is beyond the grip of cynicism. It's a world of hope. And if you're not living in that world of hope today, I really, from the depth of my heart, want to challenge you to do 4 simple things. Whether it's for the first time, or whether it's renewing what you've known a long time ago and done. Number 1, with your heart admit that you are a broken, rebellious child of God in need of reconciling. And by the way, if you have trouble admitting that, you've got some others in the same room that have the same struggle. Let's help each other out. 2, believe that Jesus died for you and rose again from the dead to bring you a taste of victory in a life which otherwise might be devoid of any victory at all. Believe that He really and truly cares for your suffering, your loneliness this Easter, your anxieties, your low self-esteem, your stress, your financial worries, your normal, abnormal family system. You can tell I'm preparing for a family marriage, can't you? Your overweight problem, your children's problems, your parents' problems, and all the rest. I hope I didn't leave anyone uncovered. He cares for every one of you. Believe that it was truly for you that Jesus died and rose again. 3, with your heart, confess Jesus as the Savior and Lord of your life. No partial and negotiated surrender, but a full and unqualified surrender of your heart to Him. He came back from the grave to knock at the door of your life. Don't let Him stand outside. Let Him in. And confess Him as Lord and Savior. And 4thly and lastly, decide. Decide that this will be the Easter where you will be 100% His disciple. Remember that Johnny Sylvester had the courage not to ask for 1, but for 2. And you can ask that for eternity. Since you have been raised with Christ, set your hearts on the things above, where Christ is seated on the right hand of God. Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things. Allow us, O Lord, to be lifted from the cynicism of this earthly world and to believe in the truth of your resurrected Son. Allow us to ask for 2 when we have nothing left. Allow our mind and our belief to rest only on the heavenly things in the Easter promise of resurrection.